True freedom. That is what this show is all about. Welcome, everyone. Today is Tuesday, July 6th, 2010. I'm your host, Mark Passio, and you are listening to What on Earth is Happening. So, tonight's topic is a continuation on mind control. We will be talking about the methodologies of mind control, and we will be getting into 3 specific methodologies if time allows. I have some ambitious aims for this show. I want to cover the topics of obfuscation, worldview poisoning, and the exploitation of primal fears. I don't know if we'll be able to get to all of them today, but that is the goal. Okay? I am also going to be reading a little bit, maybe about 3 or 4 pages from a phenomenal book that I highly recommend to talk about some of the mind control techniques that are employed against us. And the book is called The End of All Evil by Jeremy Locke. I highly recommend this book. I think it is a very simple introduction to the true philosophy of human freedom. It's a very high consciousness book. It is written in very simple, easy to understand terms. And I, again, think it is highly beneficial for everyone to check this book out. I'll be reading a little bit, a couple of excerpts from The End of All Evil by Jeremy Locke. So I will now go back to the topic of discussion that we had begun over the last few weeks here on What on Earth is Happening, which is the methodologies of mind control, the techniques of covert manipulation of the human mind and the human psyche. And I'd like to tell an anecdotal story before I even jump into the first technique. I went out to the Independence Hall Tea Party to promote for the Tesla event and to also try to identify some people who were perhaps a little bit farther along than the average Tea Partier, if some of the listening audience takes my meaning on that, to give them some of my cards for this radio show and my website. So I gave out a few of those, but I gave out a whole lot of the Tesla energy independence cards that we had printed up to promote for the event. We literally gave out a few thousand cards over this weekend. Really great work. I want to thank, in particular, Michael Riversong and David Soltis for really helping out in distributing a lot of those cards. They stood with me in some brutal heat yesterday to reach the general public and give these information cards out about this conference. So thank you guys. You hung in there with me, and we really got a lot done. We reached a lot of people, I think. So while I was at the Tea Party, I corralled about 15 Tea Partiers of all different ages and persuasions, and I asked them if they wanted to partake in a little social experiment that would teach them a lot and would help to explain one of the methodologies of mind control to them. Now, whether they even believe that mind control is real and is taking place and is all around us in society was really irrelevant at the time, because I simply asked them if they wanted to participate in a word game. And people love word games. So I got about 15 people to agree, and I had some slips of paper just folded in half, and on the inside of the slips of folded paper there was words or phrases printed, and there was a blank area in which the instructions were simply write down one word, only one word, about what this word or phrase makes you think when you hear it. Okay? So the first word that I gave them was the word occult. O-C-C-U-L-T, occult. And I handed them out the 15 strips of paper, sent a couple of pens around, and I said, just write down the first thing that comes to your mind when you see or hear that word. And, you know, I said, if you don't know what the word means at all, just write a question mark, no problem. So the papers come back, I open them all up, and I get, you know, a general consensus. People are writing down evil, negative, bad, chaos. One woman wrote down politics, which wasn't far off from the mark. I kind of laughed at that. Someone wrote down paganism. Someone wrote down, I think, religion or something like that. And, you know, an interesting array of answers came back. No one actually put down what the word occult actually means, which we have talked about before on the show. Again, occult is from the Latin occultare, a verb which means to hide or to conceal. And you can see the root of the word. It comes from oculus in Latin, which means eye. Oculus means eye. So it's related to the eye. Occult simply means that which is hidden from sight, that which is not apparent to the eye. That's all it means. So the next slip of paper went around, and it simply had the phrase on it, concealed from view, hidden from sight. And when people wrote down what they thought about this, almost invariably the word secret came back. One person wrote down, I'm trying to think the word that they used, covert or something to that effect. Secrecy, covert. Secret was invariably the word that came back for hidden from sight or concealed from view. So when I showed people that the word occult simply means that, and we are conditioned to believe that it automatically has a negative connotation, all of the words that came back were very negative. Chaos, evil, paganism, which in itself has a negative connotation, even though it isn't inherently, just pagan religions or beliefs aren't inherently negative, but in our culture it does. So the word occult has this connotation that it carries with it, that it's always something bad or vile or evil. When in fact, what I was trying to display to people is that's just something that you've been conditioned to believe, to accept, that the word occult always means evil. It simply means hidden. Nothing more, nothing less. It means hidden from sight, not easily seen. Hidden from the eye. Hidden from vision. Like the word ocular means related to vision, related to the eye, ocular. That's all occult means, hidden from the eye. So the next thing I sent around to these individuals was another slip, and on it, it said, no masters, no rulers. And almost invariably, every person wrote down the word freedom. I think one person wrote down the word liberty, which in many cases is used interchangeably with the word freedom, but almost everyone wrote down the word freedom. Because indeed, the state where there is no masters and no rulers over us is the state of freedom. I don't think many people would argue that. If you do not have a master or a ruler, someone who can tell you what to do and override your free will decision, you have freedom. You are a free being. So there was almost unanimous consent on that one. The fourth slip of paper went around, and on it was written the word anarchy. Anarchy. And there was almost unanimous consent, with the exception of, I think, one person Almost everyone in the group wrote down the word chaos. Almost everyone. And when I explained, after taking all the papers back and holding the no rulers, no masters paper right next to the paper that said anarchy, when I explained that the word anarchy, you go to any dictionary or even an etymological dictionary and just look up the word anarchy, almost every dictionary will simply define the word anarchy as the state where there are no rulers or no masters, the conditions where no one rules, the absence of a ruler or a master. Because the word, the root arch, A-R-C-H, as in archon, okay, or architect, essentially is a planner or a ruler or a master. Arch, A-R-C-H, the root means ruler. Anarchy, anarch, absence of ruler, absence of master. So if you defined the condition of the absence of a ruler or the absence of a master as freedom, and the absence of a ruler or a master is what the word anarchy means, why would someone write down the word chaos as the first word that they associate in their mind with the word anarchy? How does that happen, is what I asked everyone. If the word anarchy means no rulers, no masters, and you think no rulers, no masters means freedom, then how can you think that anarchy means the exact opposite of freedom, which is the state of total chaos? Chaos is what ensues when evil and control rule ourselves and our environment. Chaos has nothing to do with human freedom. It has everything to do with human slavery, the essential condition that the majority of human beings exist in. I would almost say all human beings exist in physically, but we're in slavery at a much deeper level, at a mental level, which is why this show attempts to expose and educate people as to the root causes of that slavery of the mind, or mind control. Mind control is what we're going to be breaking down into its constituent elements and techniques over the next several weeks here on this show. So this is a form of mind control, is what I was attempting to explain. Someone got you to believe that the word black is equivalent to white, that the word up is equivalent to down, that left is right and right is left. How does that happen? Well, that happens through the power of words and word play and word association. And that happens through repeating something endlessly, over and over and over and over and over. And if you look in a Latin dictionary at the word dictator, it means to repeat over and over. That's all the word dictator means. It comes from the verb dictere, which means to speak. Well, dictator means to speak repeatedly. That's where we get the word dictator from, because that's all it really takes to create a dictatorship, whether a physical one or a mental one. to repeat the same thing over and over and over and over again until someone believes that black is white, that up is down, that left is right. And indeed, when people saw that these two things were equivalent and that they had been convinced that they were opposite meanings, that they had been taught, conditioned to accept that the word anarchy means chaos, that that's what results when there are no rulers, no masters, you have chaos. Well, I would suggest that if you have no external rulers or masters, you have freedom, not chaos. Where I would say you have chaos is where you yourself are not the master or the ruler of yourself. When you let someone else rule you, master you, become your master, and own you, then you have chaos. And ladies and gentlemen, that is what we have right now. We don't have freedom. We have chaos in the world, in case you didn't notice. Chaos is what is reigning and ensuing. Things are in a state of chaotic flux. There isn't any order. The people that think that they're keeping order through controlling other people are delusional regarding what creates chaos and what creates order. And we've talked about those forces as natural law principles extensively on previous episodes of this show. That which creates chaos is based in fear, confusion about what is taking place within us, not understanding who and what we are, or what our true purpose is, and lashing out through fear and confusion to attempt to control others externally. This is what creates chaos. That is the dynamic of natural law that actually creates chaos in the world. Right there, it is explained. You don't have to believe me. That doesn't mean that what I just said isn't true. I've recognized that principle in my life through direct, first-hand experience. So I don't claim that that is my belief. I understand that principle. Now, many people have a hard time when I say something like that, because no one wants to hear from anyone else that they know something. This connects with the ideology of solipsism, which we have talked about on this show. This is the ideology that there is no truth and no one can actually know anything, can actually know something for sure. And this is a nonsensical ideology. Of course, there is such a thing as objective knowledge. It exists. The laws of nature do exist. They can be known. They can be known by us. You can know them. If you don't actually believe that, again, it's going to be very difficult to get to any higher state of consciousness, because you will not actively desire truth. You will not actually desire to become a seeker of truth, because you are holding the belief that truth does not exist. And therefore, you cannot grow closer to it through the acquisition of knowledge and experience. That ideology is known as solipsism, S-O-L-I-P-S-I-S-M. We've talked about it extensively. It's the most dangerous ideology on the planet, and indeed it is the ideology that I refer to as the biggest lie. It is the main deception of mind control. It is the absolute foundation upon which all tyranny is based. A deceiver, a tyrant, has to get you to accept that you cannot know the truth because it is so complex. Why bother ever even looking for it? So this idea brings us, well, before I go into that, what creates order in the world is the exact opposite of what creates chaos. What creates order is the dynamic energy of love, which is the expansion of consciousness, the expansion of our knowledge and experience, letting go of fear, and dispelling confusion within about who and what we are, becoming beings that as we think, so we feel, so we act. Thoughts, emotions, and actions, the three aspects of the manifestation of our consciousness, coming into unison as one. As we think, so we feel, so we act. This is the state we referred to as self-love, dominion, which is the rulership of self, becoming a self-master, knowing the true qualities of the self, which we talked about in relationship to the ego mind, to the egoic, lowercase self, our animal nature, so to speak. Understanding how that level of consciousness, that level of base consciousness blocks us and erects barriers to the true understanding of who and what we really are. All of this has been covered on previous shows. And when we become masters of our own selves within, of our own emotions, our own thoughts, our own actions, then, and only then, and not a moment before, will the dynamic, will the state of true freedom manifest itself on this world. That's what this show is all about, because those are the causal dynamics. Those are the causal factors, the natural law principles that create what we are experiencing around us. And they are all generated from within, not from without. So, what I'd like to do now is get into the first actual technique of the techniques that I identify as being the most critical to understand. There are many others. However, I identify 14 particular methods of manipulation of the human mind. Why is it important to understand these deeply? Well, I'd like to read a quote on that. The co-author of the book Transformation of America with Kathy O'Brien, a mind-controlled, a trauma-based mind-controlled slave of the project known as Monarch. And while I'm mentioning Kathy, I can tell you that I'm going to have a pretty interesting treat for, excuse me, for our listeners coming up in probably a couple of weeks on this show. I will be bringing onto the show live. I don't know whether I'll be doing this through the internet or possibly even in person right here in my home studio. I will be having on someone, I will not be mentioning this person's name yet, who was directly involved in Project Monarch from a victim perspective. He was a victim, a trauma-based mind control victim of Project Monarch. Now, trauma-based mind control is a little bit different than the quote-unquote soft mind control techniques that I'll be discussing over the next many weeks on the show. But I will be taking a break from discussing some of those techniques to bring on someone to tell a bit about his story in Project Monarch. And this will really, really curl the hairs on your head when you hear some of the things that take part as part of trauma-based mind control, what is known as a hard mind control technique, which we've discussed a small bit on previous shows. But I brought that up only because I was bringing up this quote by the co-author of Kathy O'Brien, who was involved in Monarch, also as a victim. Her book, Transformation of America, was co-authored by an individual who helped to deprogram her from that trauma-based mind control life that she was embedded in from a very, very young age. This person's name is Mark Phillips, and he said that for every problem, there exists a solution. But the formula for problem solving rests firmly on the quality of the supporting research information concerning the nature of the problem. I want everybody really to think about this. What is being said here in this quote is that, yes, every problem we can come to understand what the solution to that problem is. However, the actual way that you get to the solution is by understanding enough information concerning the nature of the problem. And there are many, many, many people who think this is not the case. There are many who think we can solve problems without understanding the nature of the problem. We can do an end run around it. This is a New Age belief. It is a belief. It is not a philosophy. It is a belief. A lot of New Agers will tell you, we don't need to understand how mind control works. We can do an end run around all of that and just get people to a higher state of consciousness by telling them that they need to love each other and practicing all different techniques of how to raise vibratory energy within the body, et cetera, et cetera. However, we can ignore all of that quote-unquote negative stuff. We can just ignore that. We don't need to talk about it. They don't need to know how that works. And what I say to this simply is nonsense. Nonsense. This is itself an obfuscation technique, and it's dangerous. For people not to be influenced by the techniques of mind control, they do need to know specifically how those techniques work and how they are wielded. And I will be definitive, will say that very definitively and strongly. You're not going to get out of this technique and out of this state of consciousness that we're in, which is mind control, and get out of it completely unscathed and ensure that this is not going to encroach back slowly. Even if you did get out of it by some miracle, sudden awakening of consciousness that there's not really any evidence to support, in the New Age movement, you'll hear this referred to as a Satori, S-A-T-O-R-I. A Satori moment is a sudden awakening. Someone just suddenly realizes the whole picture and how it all fits together, and their consciousness jumps an enormous amount in a very, very, very brief amount of time with technically no actual knowledge acquired in that moment. It's just a sudden awakening. And like I've said before, I'm not going to completely deny that that may occur. Maybe in one person out of billions every 100 years or so. Maybe a little more frequently than that, but guess what? The amount is so small that it's like saying, well, maybe we can count on being able to jump out the window and flying. But so far, so few people have been able to do that. Not saying it may be not possible in some, at some level of consciousness to do that. But the amount of time you would probably have to go through to see that actually happen is probably longer than the age of the observable universe. So why are we going to waste time thinking about and discussing that here? We're not. I'm talking about practical application of knowledge, doing the work on the ground, so to speak, instead of having our head in the clouds all the time. This is why these techniques are critically important to understand. Once we understand enough about the nature of the problem, we have made what is known as a diagnosis. When there's an illness, and there's an illness in humanity, in the human psyche and spirit, when there's an illness, you need to develop a diagnosis. Now, let's break this word apart. Diagnosis, D-A-I-G-N-O-S-I-S, diagnosis. We see that it is comprised of two Greek roots. Dia means through, as in to go through. And gnosis means knowledge or awareness in Greek. Diagnosis, diagnosis. Gnosis, G-N-O-S-I-S, knowledge. Dia, through. A diagnosis means to go through knowledge, to take in enough knowledge concerning the nature of the problem. And now you're in a position of power, because knowledge isn't power in and of itself. Knowledge is the means to power, because the real source of power is knowing what to do and then doing it. That's what real power is. Wisdom is the proper application of knowledge. Upstanding, right, moral application of knowledge is what wisdom is. So for those who will say you don't need to know how mind control works to solve this problem, bunk. If you want to keep your head in the sand, go and listen to some new ager tell you that all is rosy with the world. That's not what you're going to get on this show. That's not what we do here. That's not what I do here anyway. Okay? We're going to look at all of the aspects of the truth, light and dark. We will propose empowering solutions, and those solutions will come through looking at some of the dark aspects of the truth. And that's why it's critical to understand how mind control works. So, the first technique of mind control, obfuscation. O-B-F-U-S-C-A-T-I-O-N, obfuscation. Okay? This is the first out of the 14 techniques, the 14 methodologies that we are going to look at over the next many weeks on this show. And again, I will maybe break this up and intersperse it with a few guests or call-ins. As always, we'll take calls as we go through the show. But this is what the bulk material is going to be over the next many weeks on this show. So, the word obfuscation, when we look it up in a dictionary, we see that it means to render obscure, unclear, or unintelligible. Obfuscation means to create confusion. And this is the dynamic that goes to work on our emotional state. Again, when the force of fear is present within us, within we become emotionally confused. This is the dynamic that reigns over the human emotions, confusion. And the technique that is the most responsible for propagating this vibratory energy known as confusion is obfuscation. So we'll look at some examples of obfuscation. How I've likened it in my presentation is it's like someone coming up in a very elaborate, beautiful mask that's pleasing to the eye, has nice tones. Maybe they're completely dressed up in a way that is completely pleasing, but it's all a smokescreen. They're presenting something. It's like putting a very thin layer of skin that maybe looks attractive, over a piece of rotted meat or flesh, and then putting it on someone's plate to try to get them to eat what's underneath. Okay? Dressing something up, making it look good so that someone takes it in place of the real thing or in place of something that could do some good for them. And it's really reversing. It's a total reversal of different principles. Again, it's just like getting people to think that anarchy means chaos, when in fact it means the absence of rulers or masters. It's getting someone to swallow the poison pill because you covered it up in something that is attractive or appealing. To render obscure, unclear, or unintelligible, to create confusion, is to obfuscate something. Okay? So, what is obfuscated? What are some of the principles that we need to understand that are completely obfuscated? The first and most important thing that is obfuscated, that is a technique of mind control, is the obfuscation of simplicity with complexity. I'll say that again. One of the first and fundamental techniques of mind control is the obfuscation of simplicity with complexity. And again, this ties in with wrapping someone's mind up in knots and getting them to go down labyrinths, mazes in their mind, to think, wow, this stuff is so complex, I could never possibly understand it. Truth is always simple, folks. Always simple. If someone is trying to get you to believe that understanding what is taking place in this world is so complex that you could not possibly be able to understand it, they are trying to control you. They are lying to you, they are deceiving you, and they are trying to control your mind. The world is not irreducibly complex. Now, some will say, this is the ideology of reductionism. Wrong answer again. This is not reductionism. This is a simple truth. Truths are elegant and simple. And every great philosopher and every great scientist who has ever lived has said that. Truths are elegant and simple. The first technique of obfuscation is to confuse simplicity with complexity. So in helping the listeners to understand how this dynamic completely is tied in with human freedom, I'm just going to read the first 3 or 4 pages of a book called The End of All Evil by Jeremy Locke. I highly recommend people get this phenomenal book. It's brilliantly written and quite simplistically written. And it goes a long way toward helping to explain what is actually taking place on this planet. So I'll read chapter 1 called Freedom. And then I'll read maybe the first page or 2 of chapter 2, and that's it. And this is a very short book. I think the totality of the book is 90 pages or something like that. Chapter 1, Freedom. The definition of freedom is the infinite value of the human being. The definition of evil is the destruction of freedom. Everything that is evil teaches people that they have limited value. The truth is always simple. All people recognize truth because all people are intelligent beings. It is the nature of evil to create artificially complex ideas. It does this to hide or obfuscate the freedom it destroys. If you remove the complexities and fears from your life, you will find a plain and beautiful truth. This truth is the nature of your worth. To understand freedom is to understand the value of a person. Everything that evil wants is to disguise and destroy your value. All authority is created by evil men to disguise your worth. To understand your own worth is to understand the nature of liberty. The crucial key for understanding our world is to understand the nature of evil. I want to repeat that sentence. The crucial key for understanding our world is to understand the nature of evil. Evil challenges the value of people by denying them the opportunity to make their own choices, by denying them the chance to grow strong in learning and understanding. While evil seeks to destroy or hide a person's worth, freedom shows humans their full potential and their full value. With freedom, people have loved, cured disease, removed hunger, eased labor, and lived in peace. With freedom, happiness is possible. Freedom is the exact opposite of evil. Everything written in this book is written to destroy the ideas of culture and law, lowercase l, law. The lessons of this book are simple. Nothing on earth is more valuable than you. Chapter 2. There is a dark conspiracy which has clouded the minds of humanity throughout all ages. This conspiracy is evil incarnate and controls vast mountains of human emotions, work, thought, and speech. It has been responsible for the deaths of hundreds upon hundreds of millions and the slavery of nearly every being who has ever lived. If you can accept a single principle that you have infinite worth, then this book will give you the vision necessary to see the world as it truly is, to know once and for all that this dark conspiracy is not strong, but weak. That evil is not growing, but dying. To understand how evil controls people, it is necessary to understand the difference between principle and law with a lowercase l. So I'm going to stop there for one moment and help people to understand how this next few paragraphs I'm going to read are totally connected in with the idea of simplicity and complexity and the idea of principles versus law. And I'm talking about man's law here. This is the next obfuscation technique when we're talking about the methodology of obfuscation. Simplicity is obfuscated by complexity. Truth is always simple. Fear-based consciousness, what Locke here is referring to as evil, always wants you to think you cannot understand something that is simple by getting you to believe it is so complex. Why bother looking into it? You'll never be able to figure it out anyway. And this is simply untrue, and this is an obfuscation technique. The next technique is of obfuscation is the obfuscation of principle with law. So this is what Locke is going to get into discussing in the next couple paragraphs. There's only a couple more paragraphs I'm going to read. Continuing. A principle is a truth that creates freedom. I want to read that sentence again. A principle is a truth that creates freedom. I'll give an example. When I described what creates order, being the expansion of consciousness, the rulership of self, of owning our own thoughts, emotions, and actions and bringing them into unison as one, and then propagating the true philosophy of what freedom really is. That is a truth. Understanding that truth will create freedom. Therefore, it is a principle. It is one of the principles that everything that I do attempts to embody, to bring solidity to manifest in the world. It is a principle of natural law that I understand simply, and many, many, many people do understand this principle. It is not unknowable. It is very simple. It is not impossibly complex. It can be understood, and it is understood by many, many people on the earth. Sadly, more people do not understand it than do, but we're going to change that. And we can change that. So, continuing with a reading from The End of All Evil by Jeremy Locke. A principle is a truth that creates freedom. A law, lowercase l, man's law, is what he is referring to here. A law is a lie that creates slavery. Principles describe reality. They are knowledge that can help you to make use of your world. Because of your intelligence, you recognize principles in everything you do. Every true thing that you learn is a principle. Think about that. Every true thing that you learn is a principle. The movements of your hands, which foods taste good, mathematics, empathy for a friend, are all based on principles. Laws are artificial ideas created by evil men to restrict the thinking and understanding of people. And I will read that sentence again. Laws, meaning man's laws, are artificial ideas created by evil men to restrict the thinking and understanding of people. Laws mask themselves as authority so that they can impersonate principles. When people mistake law for principle, their freedom is restricted. When people mistake truth for the ideas of authority, their abilities and their wisdom are diminished. This is the purpose of law. An example of principle can be found in thermodynamics. A liquid is cooler than a gas. This is a principle. Because this is a principle, it does not restrict us, but enables us. Using this principle, we can condense and expand a substance between gas and liquid to create refrigeration. With this principle, we have more understanding and more power. Principles are truths that create freedom. An example of law can be found in the culture of royalty. A commoner owes homage to the king. This is a law. Because it is a law, it destroys freedom and enslaves. Under this law, a person must neglect usage of their minds, their speech, and their actions. They must believe that they are worth less than the king. Notice that unlike principle, there is no truth in law. It is entirely possible to disrespect the king and therefore to break the law, lowercase l. Law, lowercase l, must be enforced. To use the dynamic of control. In other words, what Locke is saying here. Law always must be enforced through the dynamic of control. Law must be enforced because there is no truth in it. A law destroys freedom because it is a lie. A principle, however, creates freedom because it is knowledge. That which destroys freedom is evil. The world is simpler than it pretends. Complexities are found in every aspect of our cultures, politics, and economies. Every day, people are introduced to new ideas, new spin, new views, or a new symptom of our world. Many of these ideas are perversions of principle, designed to engineer specific reactions from people. Evil societies invent ideas to destroy the free thinking of people. Some of history's names for these ideas have been socialism, fascism, racism, communism, democracy, class warfare, political correctness, decency, royalty, and terrorism. All of these ideas are created for exactly the same purpose. They are all vehicles to confuse the minds of the victims of slavery. They are all evil. You are capable of understanding everything in the world around you. Your intelligence is not limited. Distortions and complexities are introduced into your understanding so that evil men can control you. Evil wants you to believe that you are incapable of understanding your own world. I'll read that sentence again. Evil wants you to believe that you are incapable of understanding your own world. When you understand the magnitude of your own worth, evil will fail. There are two principles relevant to understanding the concept of intelligence. The first is simplicity. The principle of simplicity states that intelligence recognizes truth. Intelligence recognizes truth. When any truth is presented in pure form, all people are capable of understanding it. There is no truth that you cannot learn. This is the principle of simplicity, that intelligence recognizes truth. The second principle is the principle of obfuscation. Obfuscation is the distortion of principle. Obfuscation is the creation of false ideas in order to hide truth. To hide truth. Well, this is exactly what we've been talking about, folks. Hidden knowledge. The world will not be free until the occult, that which is hidden, is no longer the occult. When it becomes common sense. And that's a comment I'm making here, taking a break from the last couple paragraphs. He is talking about hidden knowledge, or otherwise known as the occult. Obfuscation is the creation of false ideas in order to hide truth. Sometimes this is simply adding ideas on top of truth to disguise the nature of the original truth, just as I described obfuscation as. Even ideas that seem entirely appropriate can be used to bury simple truths. Obfuscation is used by evil to confuse the minds of people. Obfuscation distorts principles so that people will be unable to learn. And as we've talked about on this show, the root causal factor of all the negativity and suffering that we are experiencing is people's inability to recognize truth from falsehood. That's the root underlying cause of what we're experiencing on earth, as far as human suffering is concerned. Self-inflicted suffering. Continuing. Evil uses obfuscation so that you will be unable to gain wisdom. Wisdom. Proper application of knowledge. It does this to limit your freedom. Culture knows that people will discover fewer truths if they are focused on artificial complexities. As children grow, they learn that seemingly complex ideas are actually basic and simple principles. What may have seemed impossible to understand at one point becomes wonderful once understood. It is good to gain wisdom. With wisdom, you can do anything. Your search for knowledge will become easier for you as you shed any notion of your own inferiority. And I would suggest that it will become easier to gain knowledge and wisdom as you shed the idea that truth is too complex to comprehend and to come to know. This is not true. This is a lie that the dominator culture wants you to accept and believe. We can know the truth. It is simple. Our intelligence inherently recognizes simple truths. Your search for knowledge will become easier for you as you shed any notion of your own inferiority. Evil uses obfuscation to make people feel inferior. You are not inferior to other people, and you are not inferior to ideas. You have infinite worth. And I will stop there with the reading from the great book, The End of All Evil by Jeremy Locke. And I think that's all I'll basically cover for tonight. We're winding down to about the last hour in the show. I want to thank all the great callers for calling in. I want to thank everyone involved with the Nikola Tesla Energy Independence Celebrations 2010. I want to make one final appeal to everyone in the Philadelphia area and the surrounding region. Come out to this event, get involved with these great people, participate in these wonderful ideas, and together we will achieve energy independence, and we will achieve independence on a much wider scale, the scale of true human freedom. And energy independence is a gigantic part of that. So, with that having been said, I'm going to sign off for tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening here on whatonearthishappening.com and on the Revolution Broadcasting Radio Network at revolutionbroadcasting.com. I am your host, Mark Passio, and this has been another episode of What on Earth is Happening. Good night, everyone.